What's up, Archons? I'm Flightless Pheasant, and today I wanted to take a little time to take you through my first ever Vault Tour experience out in Rochester, New York. So we're going to spend a little time on that today, and hey, maybe you'll want to come to the next one. I will be at San Antonio, so if you find time to come by, I'll see you there. The Rochester Vault Tour was hosted by Millennium Games. I was told it's the largest game store in the country, and honestly, I believe it. The space inside was incredible. They had all kinds of things from Warhammer 40k to Dungeons & Dragons to dice to miscellaneous role-playing systems. And they had, of course, a big Keyforge display that I got to see with all the stuff from Ghost Galaxy. And they had us in this big gaming room in the back that had big glass windows and so much space. I was told it could hold 500 people, which is just absolutely nuts. I think we only came in a little over 100, but still, it's nice to be in such a large space. We got settled into the space on day one, and it was time to get started with the sealed event. Before we signed up for it, they took our 3 decks and sealed them in an envelope. Some people did go ahead and get started on some practice games, but it wasn't long before they were telling us it was time to do the sealed event. We opened up our envelopes and got to take a look at our 3 decks for the very first time. The first deck I opened was Pawnworth Spawn of Decarp. This deck has a really high SAS rating, and when I was looking through it, I very quickly noticed that the Mars and Star Alliance houses both looked really good. I was particularly fond of having 3 copies of Shrink Ray Technician, because that's very good board removal and some control elements. It also had an Airlock and War of the Worlds for some board wipe effects. Destructive Analysis was not super useful, unfortunately, because I didn't have a lot of archiving capability. And I kept the Star Alliance as well because Exploratory Craft is really good. It had Comm Officer Palak and a Retro Technician Lee. I also did get to use Anachronometer a couple of times, and I'm not sure it was actually a good card, but it kept my deck moving and made sure I saw cards that I otherwise would have discarded. So I don't think it was bad. The second deck I opened was Deftog Satellite Scavenger. Nothing about this deck really spoke out to me, but apparently, according to Decks of Keyforge, it's actually a pretty good deck. I didn't go with the Mars house here because I liked the previous Mars better. Similar with Star Alliance, I was more impressed with the previous Star Alliance house than with this one. I just felt like there was better amber control and better elements that I was looking for. The Unfathomable house I didn't really like either, because my third deck had what I thought was a better Unfathomable house that I ended up going with. So my third deck was Fjarlson of Sarthakor, and this one was my only Brobnar pod. I looked through it, and there were some things in there that I kind of liked. There was a Fiery Jark, there was a Soul Bomb, there was a Recklessness. There were some things, but again, I had another Star Alliance pod that I think didn't quite match up to the previous one. It did have 3 Into the Warps, which was tempting, and it did still have Comm Officer Palak, Exploratory Craft, but it did not have the Retro Technician Lee, and I decided that the Retro Technician Lee was something I definitely wanted in order to keep recursion going very high. And then I did take this Unfathomable pod, which, it says here it wasn't very good, and maybe that's true, but I thought it did some things that I really liked. I had 2 Circle Speaks, along with the Tendrils from Beyond, which meant that I had a really easy time getting all that amber and picking it back up. Or not necessarily really easy, but a little bit easier. I like Immersioneer. I love his scrap effect. It's very good for getting my stuff back. I had Tangi Mangi. I had Echoing Death Knell. I had a few other things. But for me, the big thing that this brought to the table that I really liked was Awful Atoll. Normally a card I don't really care about, but I did in my Mars pod have a Elite Disrupt Zord. And I thought about that if I could get out Elite Disrupt Zord and Awful Atoll at the same time, I would limit my opponent to creatures with power 4 or lower. But if they played something 2 or lower, then Awful Atoll would immediately kill it. While I thought this was a really interesting combo, and I very much wanted to pull it off, and I was hopeful that an Anachronometer would help things cycle a little bit faster to make it more possible, as well as Retro Technician Lee getting that card back and putting it back into play. In practice, this really isn't what happened. I never managed to get both cards in play at the same time, and even though my amber control was pretty good, I just got totally swamped by Grim Reminders key cheats, and there was really nothing I could do about it. I lost my first game to double key abduction Winds of Death. I won my second game narrowly because I was able to keep the amber control going, and then my third game I was beaten by, I don't even remember what. It just happened so fast. That game was over in under 15 minutes. I never forged a key, and I don't even remember how that happened, but that game was over almost as soon as it started. With my day one experience pretty much done, I did spend a little time bonding with the members of the Team Visible Hand, who are from my home state of Michigan. They did take a picture with us. There were like more than 10 of us from Michigan who were all there together. I did do a little bit of a 8-person pod of Sealed. That was a lot of fun. I got to open one of my Awakenings decks that I had not yet opened. That deck was the Maven of Salt Nopolis. I opened this deck up for the pod, and I sort of didn't really see much to it. I played my first game, and I got totally smoked. But I won my next 3, and there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, I did manage to pull off the key abduction a couple of times because I did have some pieces that let me keep that tucked away. There was also a rickety cyber giant that had been mavericked into Geistoid, and I'm not sure that was any good, but it is a thing that happened. I also had a dark memento, so being haunted and staying haunted was pretty easy. No Winds of Death, though, to facilitate the key abduction. I kind of had to do it the hard way. And the Brobnar wasn't bad. I pulled off the Smith a couple of times. And barehanded was sort of useful for artifact control. So overall, I had fun with this. But the only prizes were for going 4-0, and I went 3-1. So it was fun, and I did good, but not good enough for any kind of prize today. With day 1 done, I started in on day 2 after a night's sleep that was admittedly kind of fitful. Day 2 was the Archon event, and I had pulled a Vault Masters deck the day before that I wanted to try to play, because I thought it was really good, and I was looking forward to giving it a shot in the tournament. So this is the Vault Masters deck I pulled. It's Gilpin, the Triangular Vault Master. This is actually the highest rated SAS deck I've ever pulled for anything. I don't open a ton of decks. I usually only open about 5 per set that I actually bother to go through all the trouble of putting into decks of Keyforge. And it has some awesome things that I was really happy about. As you can see, the Brobnar's got Holofest with 2 copies of Brick Nasty and 2 Headhunters. So the Amber potential in Brobnar was just absolutely nuts. It also had a Bingle Bang Bang with a draw pip that I was able to cycle once my Holofest was going to draw extra cards, and I definitely did do that a few times. The Shadows had 2 copies of Ronnie Wrist Clocks, 2 copies of Bo Nithing, a copy of Dodger, who also had a draw pip. It had Too Much to Protect, which didn't really end up happening very often because everybody was on guard for it. Makes sense. But what people weren't as on guard for and didn't really pay attention to as much as I was expecting they would is it has a Speed Sigil. And I thought for sure that everybody was going to take huge advantage of that, but my opponents were actually pretty commonly misplaying the Speed Sigil, which was nice for me, and it made Holofest go off just a little bit faster, so I actually was pretty happy with it. And then the Star Alliance pod wasn't bad, but I think 3 Grand Alliance Councils is maybe too many Grand Alliance Councils, though it did also have a Quintrino Warp, so the board control there was really strong. It had a stealth mode that I think if I could have played it more tactfully, could have been really helpful in stopping my opponent's key cheats, because that's a lot of what I ended up losing to. It had a Commander Chan, who ended up not being all that useful. It had a Crash Muldoon, whose most useful feature was that he had to draw a pip. And it had Quartermaster Body, who this deck didn't really haunt itself super easily, so I couldn't get too much value out of him. But again, he had a draw pip, and I liked getting the draw pips on the creatures. It just felt good, because the creatures are very cyclable, and so having them on creatures was good. I lost my first game, but it was really tight. I Holofested turn 1 or 2, and my opponent had to spend a few turns trying to deal with that before he could go into his combo, which he did ultimately pull off and beat me, but it was 2 keys to 3, and we were fighting for that last one right to the end, so I thought that was pretty much a perfect game. I won my second game in a blowout. I got Holofest off on like turn 2 or 3 again, and my opponent just didn't know how to disassemble a Holofest, and so I was able to run away with the game and won 3 keys to 0. And then my third game, I ended up losing. This was, again, just another 15-minute shutout victory. I don't even remember exactly if I did anything impactful during that game. I think I ended up having to discard too much to protect. I think he used a Recklessness, and I lost it. And then he just generated Amber way beyond what I could deal with anything else in my deck. And because too much protect was in my discard and I didn't have any way to cycle it, I ended up losing and being dropped out of the Archon tournament. But I did do second Amber with this deck, where it did a little bit better. I played 2 rounds of second Amber, and I won one of them and lost the other. The one I lost was to a really crazy Winds of Exchange deck that was just generating the guy who lets you draw a card when he reaps, and had 2 Legionary Trainers to put him into play ready. And I had already used 2 of my Grand Alliance Councils to try to stop that from happening, and I couldn't get the third one, and I couldn't get my Contrino Warp, and so I ended up just totally losing that game. But I had a great opponent who was a lot of fun to play against, and all in all, I'm pretty happy with how this deck performed, and there's a chance I might try to use this one again in San Antonio if I feel like I can get some more reps in with it. At the end of day 2, we did have a casual shredder event at the hotel. Unfortunately, I didn't get any pictures or video of it, so I'm just going to run some of my other footage. But it was a lot of fun. I got to play several rounds of shredder with June from the Help from Future Self team. I did a really good job, I think. I was playing really hard. I also brought a display of Unchained decks to play for that event, which that was a lot of fun. And we played AOA versus Unchained, and we kind of kept track, and that was a really good time. So I'm really glad I got to do that. And then day 3 was a casual menagerie tournament. I went 0-3 in that one and lost all 3 games, but I played a menagerie deck that my buddy brought that had no menagerie packets, which was really cool. I got to show that to Chris and a few other people. And I did end up winning a Fuzzy Gruin, so I didn't walk away with nothing. All in all, this was a lot of fun, and I'm very much looking forward to doing it again in a few weeks in San Antonio. And that's it. That was my first ever Vault Tour experience. I had a lot of fun. I got to meet a lot of really cool people from the community. I didn't win a lot of games, but hey, you know, you win some, you lose some. I'll try again in San Antonio. I'm going to hope I can get some better sealed pods and maybe play a little bit better with that. And maybe I'll end up playing the same Archon deck, or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll see what my Vaultmaster deck is for that one and play that again too. But yeah, I had a blast, and I'm hoping some of you guys will watch this video and see how much fun it was to go to a Vault Tour and want to come along too on the next one. But that's all I have for you today, so until next time, later, Archons.